This is Goku-san, DBZ, and welcome back for a new top 10 sales list of console games. This time, I'm counting down the top 10 best-selling PlayStation 1 games, or PSX. So with that said, and I felt like wearing one of my older wrestling shirts today, an old CM Punk shirt. But with that said, chose music in the background from one of the best-selling games on the PS1. And of course, I just started doing off and on a playthrough of. And of course, that being Final Fantasy VIII. Chose my personal favorite boss thing. So with that said, honorable mentions. I didn't quite make the top 10 best sales list. Still pretty impressive sales overall, though, for PS1. First up, honorable mentions. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the original. It sold 5,020,000 copies. Quite impressive. So the lowest thing of honorable mentions sold over 5 million copies. But this is PS1 we're talking about. Next up, honorable mention, the original Resident Evil. Though this includes both original Resident Evil regular version and Director's Cut, both combined in sales. It sold an estimated 5,050,000 copies. Next up, honorable mentions, sold an estimated 5,240,000 copies. Tomb Raider 2. Next up, selling an estimated 5,300,000 copies, or 5.3 million if you will. Final Fantasy 9. Now, if you listen to some people, they make you think Final Fantasy 9 is underrated, though to be fair, obviously in sales numbers, not quite so much. Here in the West, it wasn't hugely successful. It's out of those like 5.3 million, I'd say it sold probably about 1.5, 1.6 million total in North America. About 50% to 55% of its sales came from Japan. Like most Final Fantasy games, sold better in Japan, with the exception of a few. Next up, selling an estimated 5,740,000 copies. Tekken 2. Quite impressive, is it not? Yeah, Tekken 2 actually sold way better than I thought it did. I mean, I knew it sold well because we're talking about Tekken franchise here, but I didn't realize Tekken 3 was that huge. I mean, Tekken 3, I always knew was like the biggest of the franchise in sales. But this was a surprise. Next, last of the honorable mentions, selling an estimated 5,820,000 copies. Resident Evil 2, or Resident Evil 2. Sorry, but just felt like doing it. But yeah, Resident Evil 2, last honorable mention, yes, selling 5.8 million copies. That's pretty impressive, but I'm not surprised because this was when Resident Evil was becoming huge. And it did not drop below its release price of $40 on the PS1. It was about 2.5 years before it dropped from the $40. It stayed at that constant $40 for like 2.5 to 3 years. And all electronic stores. So yeah, it shows its popularity that the price did not drop for a very long time. And to this day, it's still one of Capcom's best-selling games. Coming in at number 10, selling an estimated 6,030,000 copies. Metal Gear Solid, which to this day is in most people's top 10 best games list of the PS1. Do I think it's a great game? Most definitely. I wouldn't put it on my top 10 to be fair, but maybe it's because I kind of liked Metal Gear Solid VR Missions more than the actual regular Metal Gear Solid, but whatever. But I'm not surprised it's in the top 10 best-selling games, because this is one of the top games you think of when you think of the original PlayStation, is the first Metal Gear Solid. Coming at number 9 is a franchise really I never played actually growing up in the 90s. And that's a series that really helped lead the way for franchises like Grand Theft Auto. Coming at number 9 is a game called Driver, which really paved the way for games like Grand Theft Auto. Driver was the first, really. It sold an estimated 6,270,000 copies. So, pretty good, in all honesty. For a game I really didn't know anything about, that's pretty impressive. I had no clue it was that huge and popular, but apparently it was. But maybe just because where I live, Driver just wasn't that popular. Next up, number 8. Is no real surprise because this is a game you think of when you think of the PlayStation. It sold an estimated 6,820,000 copies. Pretty impressive, and for the first game. And coming in number 8 is Crash Bandicoot, the original Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, it sold almost 7 million copies. I mean, Crash 1, I love Crash 1. It's my least favorite of the trilogy, but I still like it, but I didn't realize Crash 1 was that huge. Though, to be fair, when you think of the PS1, you think of Crash and you think of Spyro franchises. Specifically, especially Crash, the way Naughty Dog marketed the character. Which, unfortunately, today isn't by Activision, but hey, I love the Crash series. Nevertheless, and I'm actually pleased with Activision's job on remastering it. Coming at number 7, selling an estimated 7,130,000 copies. Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. The middle game for me of the trilogy. But yeah, that's pretty impressive, selling over 7.1 million copies. I'm not surprised. I expected Crash 3 to have sold very well because it was marketed heavily. I don't remember Crash 1 marketing as much, but I definitely remember Crash 3 was huge when it released. Coming in next at number 6 is a game that needs no introduction to any fighting game fan, definitely. Selling an estimated 7,160,000 copies. Coming at 6 is Tekken 3, which still to this day I believe is the best-selling Tekken game in the series. Not 100% nowadays, since now you have multi-platform Tekken games. I know Tekken Tag 2 and Tekken 6 did not. Tekken 7 may have surpassed Tekken 3 in sales, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But yeah, Tekken 3 was huge on the PS1. Heck, I still play the game to this day, Tekken 3. I love the game. Love the soundtrack, love the characters and everything about it, and especially Tekken Force mode. But I'm not surprised at all. Coming at number 5, selling an estimated 7,580,000 copies. Crash Bandicoot 2 is the 5th best-selling PlayStation game. Not surprised. I figured Crash 2 would be the best-selling of the trilogy. It's certainly, in my opinion, the best of the franchise. Of the Crash games, hands down. Dare I say, it's definitely in probably my top 3 favorite platformers of all time list. Easily. And that's something I might do in the future as a top 10 favorite platformer games. We'll see. But yeah, comes in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, selling an estimated 7,860,000 copies, which I didn't realize it sold this well, but it's because about 60% of its sales came from Japan, not from the US. Of that almost 8 million copies, about 4 million of them, 4 to 4.5 million copies, were Japan. It only sold, this game sold about 2 million in North America, and then about 1 million or so in Europe. Coming in number 4, best-selling PS1 game. The music you hear behind me, and my personal favorite Final Fantasy and JRPG of all time. Number 4, best-selling game on the PS1, Final Fantasy VIII. I bet a lot of people don't realize that Final Fantasy VIII actually sold almost 8 million copies. I, myself, was kind of surprised when I learned how many copies it actually sold. I mean, I knew it was one of the best selling in the franchise, especially given PS1 era, but I must admit, I was rather surprised when I learned it sold that well. Though, to be fair, Japan showed a lot more love for the game mechanics of the junction system than the Western audience showed. Not so much love towards it, because the bias for the materia system. But with that said, coming at number 3, selling an estimated 9,490,000 copies, just shy of 9.5 million. So almost a 2 million jump in sales. Gran Turismo 2, which is a flagship franchise, though I haven't seen much as of late from Sony, which is weird. Gran Turismo has always been a juggernaut series, much like Forza is for Microsoft. But I've never played Forza 2, so I'm not sure. I remember briefly playing Forza 1. Coming in at number 2, selling an estimated 9,720,000 copies. This is selling just over 9.7 million copies. Second best selling game in this franchise. Or rather, second best selling on the console. Final Fantasy VII. Surprise, surprise. Yes, overall it sold about 11.5 million games overall, but it sold up 9.7 million on PS1. However, it also sold about 2 million copies on PC as well when it came out. So that is why, most sales and stuff mention it sold over 11 million copies. That's not specifically on PlayStation. That was specifically overall, including PC. Some people seem to forget, Final Fantasy VII was released on PC, physical. Because I remember that in a PC game store that used to be where I live. Unfortunately, there's not been a PC store in years. For physical games, that is. But yeah, surprise, surprise. I'm not surprised at all, though. I knew Final Fantasy VII would be in the top 3. Coming at number 1, selling just shy of 11 million games, 10,950,000 copies. Outselling Final Fantasy VII by 1.2 million. The original Gran Turismo, which to this day I believe is the best-selling racing game of all time on all consoles in gaming history. It's the #1 best-selling traditional racing simulator racing game of all time. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. But at one time, PS1 to PS2 era, Gran Turismo was a juggernaut, much like Forza is today, from Xbox and PC. So I'm not surprised, honestly. But those are the top 10 best-selling PS1 games. Leave a comment below. What are your personal favorite out of this list? And what of the games on this list and sales were you most surprised about? Not next week, it'll be the week after next for the next top 10 sales list. And that list is going to be the top 10 best-selling Nintendo 64 games. So stay tuned for that special top 10 sales list. There will be a top 10 list next week, not a sales list. But it is going to be a special list. It's actually going to be a box office list. At least up to currently. The top 10 largest grossing movies of all time domestically. And sometime in the future, I might do top 10 largest grossing movies of all time worldwide. But that'll be the next top 10 list. Top 10 largest grossing movies of all time domestically in North America. Stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for a special video game pickups Nintendo Switch edition. So stay tuned for that. See you next time.